Hello and welcome to our Saturday stream. This is Fantasy Grounds Unity map and image creation, and I'm Josh. This is a stream that I do every Saturday from 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Oftentimes we go to 5 or 6 o'clock, and we do and talk about everything that is art related in Fantasy Grounds Unity, as well as do demonstrations and all of that sort of thing. So thanks everyone for joining me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And we've got a couple of requests this week. So we're going to be talking about a couple of different things and exploring some other stuff, as well as if you guys have any suggestions or anything that you guys would like to see or need some help with, please let me know. Throw it into a chat, and I'll certainly be here to happily try to help you through that. We have a question already from J-Rock on YouTube. He's trying to simulate a broken flashlight that's flickering on and off. Is there an easy way to achieve this? So we could do it a couple of different ways. Are you trying to do this on a player token, or are you doing it? One of the things that I did recently, which actually worked really well, was I made a kind of invisible token that a player could use, and I actually had it on a handout, so it was like looking into a room, and it was all dark, and you could just kind of scan around as though you had a flashlight, trying to take in all kinds of different information. It was super fun. So depending on how you want to do that, you can attach a couple of different lights to a single token. Set up the pulse, not pulse, but probably flash, and then you can do it in a couple of different increments. So if you have 2 or 3 lights set up there with different speeds, you can kind of simulate that randomness of it turning on and off. And we can do a demonstration on that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about today, we can do a little demonstration for J-Rock. We're going to actually be setting up some lighting in a couple of the maps. So one of the first things that was requested is to show off the new maps that I created for Van Richten's Guide, and the House of Lament is the ones that I actually did. So I did 5 maps, I believe, for that. So we're going to look at those today. We're actually going to set up some of the line of sight on one of the maps, at least one. And then I'm going to go through how you guys can export the XML data and do a whole bunch of different other stuff there. So we're going to be doing a few different things throughout the stream, and showing you guys a lot of ways to interact with that line of sight. And we can, during that process, I can show you how to set up a kind of similar thing to what you're kind of thinking about, I believe. And you can kind of guide me through the process as well, to make sure that we're on the same page, so to speak. So the first thing we're going to do, let's go into our assets, and I have these 5 maps already set up here. These ones have no line of sight on them, and I did this intentionally so that we could go through and talk about some of the light of sighting, talk about setting up mood lighting, and do a whole bunch of different stuff with these. And we can also kind of just show these off. So I'm going to go into my images. If you guys are unaware of this, I'll start a new category here. Let's start a new one, and I think here we have group 1. This is the new one we've just created here, and I'm just going to call this not Gauss, House of Lament, and we can stop editing. And now when I go into here, nope, not there, you can see that this is open. So one of the things that you should be aware of is whatever you have selected in your images folder. If I were to click on this one, for example, the first floor, and I create an image record, it's going to go to wherever I have selected. So if I don't have anything selected, it's going to go into the uncategorized area. And if I do have anything else selected, everything that I create from this method is going to go right to where I want it to go. Oh yes, yeah, that is going to be. So the way that you can get around that, J-Rock, is that you want to set your parameters a little bit differently. Yes, so when they overlap, they're going to intensify because all the light is additive. So if you want to start off with a completely bright light in the first place, And I'll show you how you can kind of set that up. And we can do the adjustments from there. So here's our first map that we have set up. Let's just make this large so you guys can kind of see this and zoom in here. Now the first thing, and I'm going to be setting up the line of sight on this map, and we're going to be exporting it. I'm going to show you guys and give you guys a link to the tool that you can download to extract all of the XML data for our line of sight. And then we can include that in here so that every time you drag this in and create a new image record, it's going to drag all of that in there as well. So I had a request about how to create your own art packs and how do you set up the line of sight and have it included in there. So I'm going to do a brief little demonstration on that today as well. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to be kind of creating this environment. Yeah, random speed checkbox would be great. And perhaps we will get something like that in the future, J-Rock. But currently, there isn't anything planned for that. But we never know. We could see that in the future here. So here's the first map that I created. This is the first floor of the House of Lament. So I can just kind of zoom out here. I don't have the originals set up in here to compare them. But these are a pretty good facsimile. All of the walls, everything is lined up exactly the same as it was, as well as I went in and did, here you can see I created a nice little Ouija board for the seance area in here. Spoilers, if you guys have not played this or read through it, there's a seance area where you several times you go and during different parts of the adventure. I also tried to painstakingly go through and read through the adventure and make sure all of the environments were exactly the way that they were supposed to be. And you'll see this as we go through each one of these. So here we have, this is like a gardening area with these large windows that kind of wrap around, as well as like this is described as like a spiderweb pattern in the floor with a lot of boards that have been pried up. So there's a whole bunch of different kind of cool features in here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is, and this should be completely noted, right? This is a really important thing. If you're going to be extracting the line of sight data, if you're going to be using this as an extraction method, you do not want to move this in any way. So if we turn this on, right, let's set up our grid here. You're going to see that this is not lined up perfectly, and we don't want to move this at all. If I move this, it is going to make all of the line of sight that I actually extract out of here a little bit off. So I want to make sure that it comes in exactly as it's created. So when we create a new element, we make sure that you do not move the actual image itself. So I do not want to come in here and move this image. Let's just drop down the, well, we can just kind of turn this off right now. We don't really necessarily need it as we're going to be setting up all of this different stuff. Oh, hey, Fantasy Grounds College. Yeah, Classic is going to be getting retired here in the future. Let's see here. Do you include a cheat sheet with a group or collection photo so we do not have to open all of the folders or bags? I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that. If you could elaborate a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have this layer selected, and I want all of my line of sight to be attached to this one layer. I don't want to do any of these. I don't want to have multiple layers if I don't have to, right? I want to make sure that all of my line of sight is attached right to this one particular instance, one particular layer. And the first thing that I'm going to do is what I always do is I go in and do all my doors first. And I'm just going to select my door and I'm going to grab this rectangle. Now all of these doors are pretty much either left and right or top to bottom. So with the rectangle tool selected, I can just kind of zoom in and we can just start to add in our little door elements. So I'm going to go through and do each of these. And I'm going to set up my line of sight before I turn on my lighting. because I really don't need to worry too much about how those are going to interact at first. And we might have to do some adjustments later. And one of the things that I like to do, especially in environments like this, think of them as like movie sets. So when we're putting our lighting systems together, we can use our lighting in a particular way to generate mood and some ambience. And this is going to allow us to, in a narrative fashion, one of the things that I really like to do with maps, and I like to do in general in the system, is to create areas. And I think we'll just, for simplicity's sake, we'll just make that one door. Oftentimes I'll make the double doors into two separate doors, so you could open one side and not the other. One of the things that I really like to do is to send as much information, visual information, as I possibly can. We're using these environments in a particular way to create not only a recognizable kind of place by which that we're playing inside of, but also we want to create a narrative element to it. We want to use our environment in such a way that it will tell our players a lot of information without the DM having to really invest in a lot of descriptors. And we can set a lot of that mood with our lighting system. And I'm going to show you guys a little bit about that today as well. This is where we start to think about things as like a set, right? Like if we watch a movie, and sometimes if you really start to watch a lot of the background elements, the lighting systems and how it's set up, all of those kind of interact together to create the mood of the scene. Now we're going to be doing something similar to that. We're going to be doing that exactly in the same kind of vein there. And it's a really good habit to get into when you start to think about these areas. And we can set very low lighting systems that our players are going to be able to see and interact with without it interfering with any of the other elements, right? So if I set, for example, a nice soft kind of glow of a light inside of an area, as long as my opacity is low enough, then it's not going to show any creatures that I might have hiding in there. It's not going to interact with anything beyond just setting up that very, very subtle kind of visual cues. Now I'm going to switch over to my walls. Actually, we should probably do our windows next. And this is going to be a little bit different because we're going to be going around here, but I'm just going to set up a couple of, whoops, I didn't want to do it that way. Let's just select this and hit delete. And I'm just going to set up a couple of windows. And the windows will not prevent any sort of visual obstruction, just movement. And so these are really great. You can use these in a lot of different ways. And here we have a broken one, but I'm still going to add a window element there. And I think that that's pretty much it for all of the major kind of window structures. Now there probably is going to be other windows in through here, but we're not going to worry about that right now. And then I'll switch to my line tool. And I'm just going to kind of bend around this and connect here. And I'm going to do the same on the opposite side here. And double click to connect there. Great, that's all of our basic structure. You can see how quickly you can kind of get this to go. Oh yes, I see what you're saying, Fantasy Grounds College. If you need an asset, generally you will not always know what asset you'll need within a given session. A preview photo would be handy in the top level of an art pack to help you avoid. Yes, you're absolutely correct. And there has been some talk about having some thumbnails in there to allow for that. But currently, right now, probably the easiest way to do it is with the search feature inside of your assets folder, which can also be a little bit cumbersome if you have a lot of files. But that's a good point, and we should definitely kind of think about that. And now I'm going to just start to build out all of my wall structures here. And a great new feature is if you hold down Shift, You can see that I can only move this in a 90 degree, 45 degree increments. So this is really great for lining up along these walls. I can hold down Control if I want to not snap to any of the other elements that are around here. And again, I can hold down Shift, and then we can just snap to these, and then boom. We have a nice wall selected there and done. Now here, I'm going to fudge this a little bit because this kind of sticks out in a strange way. So I'm just going to kind of build a slight little variant in through here. So I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm just going to select there. And then I can hold down Shift, and if I hold down Shift and Control, it will not snap, and I can be a little bit more precise with this. Again, I can hold down Shift, and this makes doing this stuff exceptionally easy. So I hope you guys are all having a great week. Let's see here. We have a question. Do the windows and doors, this is from Salmon Man, do the windows and doors and walls need to have thickness, or could you just put a single line in the center of the structure? So depending on the occluder, so the walls you can do that with. Doors and windows and whatnot work much better if you do them with a bit of thickness. And the reason for that is that they actually have a toggleable feature inside of them. And that just enables you very easily to have that interaction where you can easily click on what needs to be done to open the door or the window. And when you're doing these kind of structures, you can certainly get into the habit of doing a lot of occluders around here, but you don't need to do that at all. If you Usually it is the best practice to do as a little number of occluders as possible to get the basic shape that you want to. So when I do this, what I like to do is I go to a distance, and I don't want my line to go to the outside. See, if I go too far, I'm going to be cutting off the wall. So I want to go to a distance where I'm not too far inside of the wall, but the line itself doesn't come to the exterior part of it. And so I'm just going to drag this out and find a good location. Same here. And I'm just going to continue this around. And I'm just using my middle mouse button to help me navigate around while I'm doing this. And if you do something like that, which I clicked the wrong button, don't worry, because we can move it after the fact. And then I can come right back in here. Same here, like that's a little bit too high, but we can just move that really easy after the fact. Yes, I oftentimes do that as well, Obsidian Shard. What they said was they try not to have the wall markers right on the edge of the image. Yes, I do oftentimes the same exact thing. I will put them inside of the walls a bit so that you can have a little bit of visual fidelity to the actual environment. There is, and this is might not be known, and I'll show this, but there is a small amount of bleed through set into the system just for that. Now you should also, when you're doing your walls like this, you can you want to make sure that you always connect through the doors on the edges. Otherwise, while a player is standing inside of the door, they'll be able to see down through the wall. And then again, I'm going to do this the same way. And we could, if we want to, we can go around like these little things if we want to add in a little bit. Now you should be also aware that the system can handle a huge amount of occluders. So you can do quite a lot. But the more occluders that you add, the more performance that will be required from any system running the map. And now I'm just going to hold down Shift and come right up here. And then I'm just going to add these right across. And then I'm going to come right in through here. I'm going to hold down Control, and then I'm just going to do something like this. And so you can see how quickly you can kind of put these together. And moving even faster, you can do it a whole bunch of different ways. Oh, thanks, Play Games Patty. And now we can do some of these interior areas in here. And I'm going to just to kind of do this a little bit faster. So these maps do come with the new Van Richter's guide. And all of the line of sight is already set up for them. Zacchaeus did a great job. He also did all, it comes with all of the lighting pre-built. And he and I actually worked together setting up some really cool mood lighting in them. And we're just going to come along here. And once we have all of our line of sight set up, we're going to dive in and start to do some of the lighting features. This little added shift feature is actually something that makes doing this a lot less labor intensive. Now let's do this section up here. Well, I'm going to do these. So have you guys actually seen this or purchased, make sure we go across there, or gotten a hold of the Van Richter's Guide yet? I haven't actually read through anything but the adventure. I have heard some pretty good positive feedback from a lot of people saying that it's a really great supplement, but I haven't actually gotten to dive into it. And we'll come right up on here and around the corner here. And I'm just gonna hold shift up around this corner. And here. Up around this. So the question is here, will LOS also be included in third parties supplier products like Cobalt Press? And that's going to be completely up to them. So if they have done the line of sight and included it in their product, we will probably not do it in-house. But as long as they do it when they submit their products to us, then it'll all be included in there. So I would imagine that that would be on a per um, product basis, and depending on the company itself. And we'll go right up here and around, bringing it up this way. And we're going to bring it all the way over to here. And you can see we've almost got this all done. We've been working on it for a very short amount of time here. We have a couple of different little wall sections, and then that'll be over. And then we will start with our line of sight. And then we're going to be going through and doing all of the extraction as well. I'm going to show you guys how you can do this. Create your XML file, and not only will it have all of the different line of sight data included in it, but we can also set up our grid information so that our grid will be set up to the default level that we want it as well. With the Forge coming out soon, this will be a good kind of introduction into how you can create your maps, set up all of this information, extract it, and then you can put it on the Forge and share it with the community. One of the cool things about the Forge is that you'll be able to, it'll be tied into the patch system, the update system. So even community created extensions and whatnot, you won't have to search through any of the forums anymore. Whenever there's an update, it'll just handle it all automatically. So it's going to be super exciting. And we'll go right to that corner and then all the way up to here. Whenever I do these, I always kind of get that feeling like, have you ever tried to skin an apple and make all of the skin one single peel? I oftentimes feel like that when I'm doing this, try to make one long continuous element. And I'll start down here. and bring it right down, and then I'll just bring this out. Now some of these I think are supposed to be able to get uh, interact with. I think that there's a thing with the chimneys. So if we were doing this for actual functionality inside, those might have been toggleable walls in certain parts of it, so that you can actually allow players access to the interiors. But for us doing this right now, I think that this is going to work out pretty well. Oh, DJ Breaktime, you had shoulder surgery. That's too bad. Hopefully you're having a good recovery. I bet. One hand it makes things a little bit tricky, for sure. All right, well, that's all of our basic line of sight, right? We have some stuff outside if we wanted to come out and do this as well. These are all of our porch um, supports here. You can see we put all of our line of sight onto one particular layer, and we're going to put all of our lighting on this layer as well. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to turn on our line of sight. We can turn on our player visibility. We can also hold down Control P for this, which I think I'm going to leave it off so that we can have a really good kind of understanding here. So the first thing is what we're going to do is we're going to add in some sort of ambient light source on the outside, right? And then we're going to mask out all of our interior, but not where we have our actual windows, right? We want our windows to kind of have light peering in. I'm going to show you a couple of different things that you can do to mimic this without making it too complicated. But in here, for example, I'll probably just leave this room completely unmasked. So what we'll do is we're going to come into our lighting system and we're going to turn on our ambient light source. So the first thing we want here, let's turn it on to begin with, and then we can start to adjust our colors. We can make it anything that we wish. So let's say, for example, we could even use like a preset one. So maybe if you want to do like sunlight or dusk, these are all preset up with our ambient shadow color and our actual ambient light color. So these are going to create like an instant kind of mood for us. And when we hold down Control P, you can see we have these soft, subtle kind of shadows coming off of our walls here, right? So let's just go back and toggle this on. So here's our shadows. And if I jump back over into my ambient lighting in the shadow area here, I can make these darker if I so wish, depending on how much interaction that I want to have with these. And you can see that this actually works pretty well. We wouldn't have these shadows because this is all under a porch. So we can mask out a lot of this stuff, or we could actually add in additional occluders here. That's going to help with that. So we're going to work with all of these different systems and try to come up with something great. You can see that we have these natural kind of amounts of light, but we don't want light to be coming into all of these different areas, right? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to add a mask. And once we do this, you can see that we now have a hide area selected. So what I can do is I can just come up in here and I can begin to black out all of this ambient light. So none of the ambient light source is going to be included into these areas here, right? And I'm actually going to do it here as well. We're going to set up some false lights that are going to kind of come in from the outside area here. So I'm just going to do this quite roughly. We'll add, and I'm going to do this primarily just with the squares. And I want to make sure that we add in these elements here. And I'm not going to worry about the outside right now. Now if I hold down Control, I can now just draw out a circle. And I'm just going to mask this as best I can around these edges. As you can see, that's pretty rough, but it'll suffice for right now. Now, a trick that I do when I'm doing this for real is I actually have like a graphics screen that I paint and draw on. and I'll hold up a circle template and get it to the right size, and I'll cheat like that. And then I'll use my stylus and I'll draw out perfect circles. But with a mouse, it's a little bit trickier. Okay, so now we have all of our lighting system kind of set up in here. That's true. J-Rock just said on YouTube that if you draw LOS walls to the edge, tokens can sometimes get stuck on them. Yeah, in fact, that's a really good kind of point here. Let's turn off this player visibility for right now. And in actuality, if this is lined up with the grid, I've actually changed where many of these door layouts are. In the original creation of this map that comes with the original ones that came in Van Richter's Guide, this House of Lament, they seem to be in between and kind of cockeyed with the actual grid system. So I made sure that these all line up perfectly in the grid itself. So whenever these doors, wherever possible, I made sure that they lined up so that you don't have any sort of problems with grid movement. Now with this, I'll keep this off for right now. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add in some of these areas in here. So I'm going to create some pseudo lights coming in from the window here. And I'm going to do that by selecting my light color. And I'm going to grab this hexadecimal code. And I'm going to go into Add Light. And I'm just going to drop in a couple of lights here. Now these are way too big at the moment, and that's fine. I can select all of these lights, and I can adjust them in tandem because they are all set the same. And now I can hit Control V, change their lighting to be the same as the outside. You're going to see it's going to be mixing out here, and I don't want that. I just want it to have this kind of subtlety coming in. So I'm going to do these much smaller. I think I want to put this like a 1 and maybe 2 here, something like this. So now when I hit Control P, you can see that I get this nice little kind of ambient light source. And now you can see that I do have a little bit of an issue on the exterior here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move these around and change them. So let's turn this on. And with all of these selected like this, I can move them all around as well. And what I think I'm actually going to do is maybe even reduce my brightness all the way down to 0. And so I just have this very kind of subtle ambient light. And you can see that this is going to create this nice little area in through here. So if we move these around individually, as you can see, and we might want to drop this down to something like 1, and this one 2. Depending on how much light we want to have coming in, we might just want to move them in a bit to something like here. Maybe I'll make this back to 2 again. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to line these up and try to create a little bit of a variance in here. So where they overlap, I'm going to try and kind of manipulate this scenario here a little bit, because I want my lighting to be coming in from this direction. Now the other way that we could do this, right, is we can experiment with this in a whole bunch of different ways. So let me just show you a couple of different ways that I'm going to move these out of the way for the moment. Another way that we could do this is in our ambient light source. We can get back into our masking scenario here. And I could just remove this area in here and allow this to happen. But you can see that this is going to create a lot more. Well, I should probably make sure that this closet's hidden. But this is going to create a lot more variance. And then I could use these lighting systems to kind of fade this off on the edge here. And you can see that you're going to have a very kind of abrupt kind of transition here. So the way that I like to do it the most is just by these little fictitious lights. And you're going to get a little bit of ambience on the outside here, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that too much. And then I can come back in and make sure that I hide this area once again. And now we just have a little bit of ambient light source kind of coming in. We have this orangey kind of dusk throughout here. And now I'm going to switch back over. Let's turn off of our player view for the moment. And we're going to start to set up some other lights in the area. So one of the things that I talked about previously is setting up some nice kind of cool interactive environmental ambience. And one of the really neat things that you can do with the lighting system is, let's say, for example, I'm going to close that for right this second. But let's drop a light inside of here. And now we have this bright white light that is inside of here. It's probably a little bit too big for the area that we want to deal with. But I'm just going to drop down to maybe like 2, and I'm going to change my drop off here to both 100 because I'm going to be using this just as a little short little ambient light. And now I'm going to turn my player view back on. You can see that we have a little bit of light in there in this particular room. So what I'm going to do with this selected is I can now just drag around the color picker until I find something that is going to be fitting for what I want to do in here, right? So maybe I want to have this soft glow, and then I'm just going to drop down my alpha here. And now what I've created is a very subtle kind of atmospheric lighting source. And let's just hit OK. And when we come back over in here, you can see that it is just very, very subtle. And so if we drop, let's grab one of our players here. So we got, let's grab Johnny. And as he begins to interact with the area, you can see that we're looking through Johnny's eyes. And as he comes in, he can't see anything inside this area in here. And I'm just going to grab him and drop him over in this area. And you can see that all he sees inside of this area is a really kind of subtle lighting source. And now with him in there, I can kind of see exactly what's going on. And I'm just going to I'm going to make sure I have this light selected. And we can drop down these kind of opacities here. Let's see, does Johnny have any sort of lighting or anything? I'm in Core RPG, by the way. So let's just check his token lights is off, and he's got no visibility. Now, when we open up some of these doors, right, when we have, let's get back into our play area here. As you can see, when he comes out, you're going to have a little bit of, just a little bit of ambience where it comes out through these little areas here. And this is just enough to give a little bit of a idea about what's in these areas. Now we can go in and begin to set up a lot more of this kind of feeling, right? We want to make sure that we maintain a little bit of this kind of ideas. And here's another cool little trick that you can do as well. And one of the things that I also like to do sometimes to add a little bit of extra ambience is I'll create a I'm going to just grab that there and switch over to my add light. Hit OK there, and we're going to drop this down to be quite small. And I'm going to drop one right on the inside of this door. Now, what we can have here is a little bit of, and I should probably add another one over here as well. So what I like to do is, this is going to be the light that spills in from the door when you open it. Because the door itself is going to block all of our lighting, it will allow the player to, when they open the door, it'll feel as though that the light is kind of spilling in. I can turn these off manually if it doesn't make sense. If they come in and they turn it, they shut the door from the inside. But for this kind of scenario, and let's get back over in here, and we'll grab Lisa in here. And as you can see with Lisa selected, she cannot see the light on the other side. And then when she opens the door, boom, it feels as though there's a little bit of ambient light source coming in there. I would probably actually match this instead of the exterior lighting system to the shadow color. So I would grab this, and then we can just switch back over, select this light, make sure we have it selected, and there we go. And I should do the same here. So now when we come back over and we select our little Lisa, she comes around to the outside here, and we have this door that she can now open. Boom, we have this little bit of an ambient light source coming in from the outside, where it's kind of spills in, but then it's completely dissipated by the time that she enters into the rest of the area in here. And she can also move around. And see, you can see that she can see in through these windows, as well as see in through this window. But her movement is completely blocked. And this is why we have a little bit of thickness in here, so I can open the window if I want, and then she can move through. Great. Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of different elements that are all set up in here. We have a couple of different light sources. So maybe we want to make sure that Lisa, what we're going to do now is set her up. Let's actually reset her fog of war so she doesn't know anything that she's seen before. And we're going to actually add in a lighting source. I'm just going to do it here from this token light. Now we could also add it in from the combat tracker. We could do lots of different things. But we're going to do her broken flashlight. We're going to figure that out really quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, we want one that has, maybe we're definitely going to want to do a flash one. So let's do flash. So here we have one that's turning on and off. Let's actually make it quite small so that we can kind of see this a little bit better in the environment. And I'm actually going to grab her and drop her. Oh, no, I want to go into this mode. And I'm going to drop her in here so that we have a pretty good idea of, well, let's see here. Where would be a good big room that we can kind of drop her in? She'll be in here. And again, I'm just going to reset her fog of war so that we have a pretty good understanding. So here we have her lighting system that's going on and off here. We want to do it in a particular way, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set this up a little bit differently, right? So with this particular token light selected, I'm actually going to make this maybe like 2 and this 2 as well. So you can see that we only have a little bit of a bright light kind of going on there. I'm going to change my fall off. Let's do 100. And let's do this like 1.9. Just so we have a little bit of variance just on the outside of that. So where we're doing a flashlight, we really don't want to have a whole lot of dim light. And so we're going to just be using this as our base. We're going to be doing a couple of ones that are just like this. So here we have it set. Let's set these to, let's do this one to 75. And then I'm going to add another light. And this one is going to have a flash as well. And we'll set this one to 50. And now in this one, I think what I'll do is drop down my alpha. Until we find it so that it doesn't have too much intrusiveness. And maybe we even put this one to 100. And that's still quite predictable, so we might even add another one. And this one, again, we might drop down its opacity. And we make this have a flash as well, maybe with like a speed of 25. And now as Lisa begins to investigate around, let's make sure we're in our play mode. Our flashlight kind of flickers on and off. Sometimes it's a bit brighter, sometimes it's not quite as bright. And by adjusting and adding several of these kind of light sources, you can probably come up with some really cool kind of flickering ways that it kind of interacts. Sure, yeah, we can put them all at higher speed, so we can easily do that. So maybe if we do this one at 80, and then we can go back through. This one's at 100, and maybe we set this one at 75. And you can add more lights to this as well. So if we now go through and we go to the fourth one that we've just created, and we add a flash to this, and we do this one at like 95. So you can start to add in a whole bunch of different stuff. Not necessarily. Not necessarily if it's a blue light. What you really want to do, let's change the lighting. Let's make it blue. Let's make it like this blue. So I'm just going to grab this. And this is going to reset all of the different light systems. What you're going to have to mess with when you're doing it in this way is the alpha after the fact. So here we have this dark blue light, and you can see that it doesn't, they all seem to be interacting fine together. As these light sources are adding together, what you want to do is make sure that these interact in the way that you wish, and you can control that a lot with the alpha. So you find whatever the brightest amount of blue light that you want it to be, and then by adjusting the alpha of these, if we go through here, when they overlap, you're obviously going to get brighter ones, but this is the best way to kind of control that interaction. Oh, so we have a question from David. Could you create the lighting scene and save? Yes. So everything that you create is going to be saved for you. So we're doing a little bit of a prep thing here, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to extract this data, and so that every time that you drag this in, you're going to have all of your line of sight already included. Oh, you can do both. You can either you can configure things beforehand, but it also updates in real time to all of your players. So you have the total freedom to kind of be included in all of that stuff. So let's just delete these lights. So you can do both. Yeah, we'll just need the random speed checkbox. That's right. All right, so now let's get back in here. Let's delete Lisa. I'm going to add in a couple other small little ambient light sources in through here. Maybe we'll do one in here. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select this. And maybe we're going to increase our dim. And maybe we're going to put this down to 0. So it's just a dim light source. And maybe we want it to fill up our room here pretty well, right? And I might even want to create another one. So I'm just going to do this again. And I think I'm going to put them up against this wall so we get this nice kind of ambience it's in the room itself. Now again, I can select both of these and I can come in, I can drop down the opacity of this if depending on how subtle I want this to be. And this is just a like mood kind of lighting, right? And if we come back in and let's just toggle this off for a second. But we have these little like candles on here as well. Maybe we want to have those lit, or maybe we want to have some light coming off of a fireplace. Let's actually do that down and through here. Let's put it in a separate spot. So let's add in a couple of light sources that we're going to be doing throughout. Here, I think that we can probably start off with like torch or maybe candle might work the best. And then I'm just going to drop this down through here and you can see we get this nice little flicker effect. And then we can kind of set this in through here. And again, if we hit Control P, we can kind of see it from the player's perspective. Coming in through here, we can also adjust all of our fall offs. So maybe we're going to do like 100 so it's a little bit smoother. But maybe even just 50 will be enough. And again, Control P, that's going to allow us to see that ambient light that's coming off of our little fireplace. Maybe that's going here. So here we have a whole bunch of different systems and we've set up all of our line of sight and we have not moved our layer whatsoever. We've accidentally added in a couple of additional light layers, but that's okay. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over to Fantasy Grounds and we're going to download the LOS extraction tool. So I'm going to put that link into chat for you guys. So if you guys have not seen it, this is where you're going to go, and this is going to take you right over to the wiki and right to where you can download the FGLOS tool. And what this tool actually does is it extracts all of your line of sight data, and it creates a new XML file, and we'll put it into the same folder or wherever you wish it to be. And so the way that Fantasy Grounds actually works is it takes an image file and it looks and sees if there's any other data files that have the same name. So if you have an XML file that has the same name as your image, it'll automatically grab that information and add it into the image when you create a new image record. So let me just set up, I'm going to have to set up a new kind of capture thing here, so that I can show you guys how all this system works and how you can integrate this. So this way you can set up, for example, if you want to, if you were going to create your own maps and you wanted to share them or do any of those other types of things, this is the way that you can actually go about doing that. I'm actually going to do, let me just do a screen capture of my whole screen here. I'll just create a nice new little section over here. All right, I usually just have a window capture, but I'm going to do my entire screen so I can show you all of this kind of process. And we can, let me get this up. Okay, so once you've downloaded the FG LOS extraction tool there from the link that I just put out to you guys, and if you didn't get the link, let me know. I'll make sure that it gets into the appropriate chat here. And let me just transition this over. So here you guys can see here is what you're going to get when you run this program. We have the extract LOS data from the DB XML or modules DB files. So what this actually is, and we can also inject the grid size and do a whole bunch of different stuff with this tool. It's a great tool. It's totally free. So you can certainly download it and be able to create your own art packs this way with all of your line of sight included into it. So basically what we're going to do when we click this button, we're going to get a new screen that pops up. This is going to, we're going to look at our actual database of our entire campaign. So if you're going to be doing this and creating your oh, Carl. Hey, Carl. So you can do this from inside of FGU now. Apparently. So let's see. Oh yes, oh that's awesome. So apparently it's all built in. I was unaware. So thanks, Carl. So you can actually do this from right inside of here. You can actually export the metadata by the base file in here. And boom, here it is. This is the exactly the same exact tool, but all built in, which I guess I wasn't even aware of. So thanks. And so you don't need to download that anymore. And here we're going to be creating our XML file. I'm just going to save this to my desktop. Or actually, I'm going to go where I should put it. Into my images here. And this is going to create a new XML file for me. And let me just open this up. And we're going to jump over into where I just had that to show you guys how this interacts. So here I am in my images here, and here we have the first floor. And you can see that this is all named exactly the same thing. So that's a great new addition. So thanks, Carl, for pointing that out. I wasn't even aware of that. And here what we can do is, if we wanted to, we can actually go in and do any sort of adjustments that we wanted to after the fact inside the XML file itself. But this is going to have all of that metadata that's already included in that. So now when I close this down, for example, and if I were to create a new element of this, this is going to have all of that information that's already put right in there. So all I have to do now, and I'm actually going to put this into another area in here. Let's create a new category. And here we have group 1. And I'm going to turn this into test. Let's do this. And we'll jump down into our test area in here. And I'm going to grab this one and drop it in here. And you're going to see it's got all of our lighting all set up, all of our walls. And if we turn this on, boom, it is all ready to go. Because it is now referencing all of that information that we just did. Oh, hey, Hauser. The dark theme will be released, I'm assuming if it wasn't released this last Tuesday, it'll be the next one. I'm not exactly sure. I just send the stuff out. And it's depending on what's getting released for each Tuesday is when all of the new products come out. And depending on how many different products are in the queue, it could get bumped to the first or second week of every month. And so that's exactly how you're going to do that. So I did get a couple of requests, one specifically about how to do that, and now it's super simple. You just do it from right in through here. So I have an actual, what I would really like to do next is, let's close this down. And I'm going to go back into this House of L here. And let's actually drag and drop this one in. We'll create this one as well. Now, when we're ever going to extract this information, it's so important that we do not move this in our grid system, right? We don't want that to happen. And our grid information is going to be included in this as well, right? So if you notice that when we have this one open up, not this one, but here, our grid system is already set up. So when we create a new element of this, so let me just, I can delete this now. Let's delete these both. And now when I drag and drop this in, you'll see that it already automatically sets all of this stuff up for us. I believe, let's get back in here. Yeah, this has all of that information in there for us. So in this particular element, this is going to be a great one for setting up a whole bunch of different cool lighting effects and going through all kinds of different areas in here. So this is the basement and the lower portion of the House of Lament. You can see we have this wine cellar with wine spilt all over the place, broken bottles and whatnot. And it kind of comes into these rough areas in through here. And then there is this deep dark hole, which then comes down into this huge piece of amber that is glowing and is down in this like gooey pit. So there's lots of really cool and interesting kind of stuff that we can do this as well. And this is a really great kind of, the walls are supposed to be and these frozen, like these petrified figures. And so I kind of created a similar kind of fashion with the wall system around here. And when we're doing the line of sight of these kind of areas and through here, we want to make sure that we don't get too involved in all of the ins and outs. It's better to keep it kind of generalized, and so that we can actually get a much better visual quality of the actual environment itself. So again, I'm going to do this 100 by 100, and I'm not going to move my map at all. I'm going to make sure that it stays exactly where it is. And I'm just going to make sure that its visibility is toggled off. And then again, I'm going to actually start with this down through here, and then we're going to go up through. This will go a little bit faster with these square walls here. And in this kind of scenario, I'm actually going to make sure that I have this selected, and I'm just going to start in one arbitrary kind of area in through here. And I'm just going to do a very generalized kind of rough reiteration of what the wall shape is. I do not want to, again, I mean, you're more than welcome to go in and do it as detailed as you wish. Remember, the more occluders that you put in, the more performance is going to be required from your machines and from your players. Although you can have quite a lot of occluders without seeing too much of a performance hit whatsoever. I sometimes make massive maps, and I've never really run into an issue. And there's these pillars here, so we're just going to do these kind of center areas. And that's basically it. I can actually, if I want to, I can add maybe a terrain piece for this, but depending on if I want it to be able to block the line of sight or not. And here's one of the really interesting things when you're starting to set these up. Think about it in the play mechanics. If there's going to be no monster or anything that's going to be hidden behind a particular element, then it's not necessary to add in the occluder information, unless you think it adds a great deal of the environmental kind of atmosphere. And again, I'm just going to do exactly the same thing here. I'm going to switch over and do a door first. I like to do my doors first, and then I can easily tie into them. And then this is supposed to be an area that's going to fall apart, I remember, from the adventure itself. So I'm going to create this as a toggleable wall here. And I'm just going to do a section of it. And then I'm going to tie this in with the actual other wall. So what this means is I can actually turn this on and off during gameplay. So now I'm going to just come in and grab this, holding down Shift. I can just really quickly follow around these edges. And I can just click right onto here, come right down, and I'm going to line this all up. And then again, I can just kind of a little bit more haphazardly add in any sort of element that I wish around these rough wall exteriors. Again, I'm just going to line this up around the edges of my walls here. And line this right up along here. Holding down Shift, I can quickly come over to this area, and then I can be a little bit more relaxed as I move this around. Just kind of basically getting the shape, and then I'm going to come up and let's connect here. And I'm just going to double click to end it. And now I don't have to do any of this exterior stuff because this is all like in the ground kind of scenario here. And if I want to move any of the occluders, I can just grab them, select them, move them around. Maybe I want to make this a little bit more of a gradual kind of change or pull this out a little bit. If I want to just remove this at all, I can just remove that point and make that a nice straight line. So you have total control after you've put these down as well. So make sure that you definitely use all the tools to your advantage here. Now we have this stairway that's kind of going up, and then this is going to lead up into the exterior here. So there's a bunch of different ways that we can handle the line of sight of this as well. One of the things that you can do in this kind of environment is I like to use pits a lot to create elevation changes, but you can get creative and do a whole bunch of different stuff in there. But you can see that this is all of our basic kind of elements. And then we have this iron gate here. And there's a bunch of ways that we can do this as well. But I'm just going to do it. Let's do it as a simple door. Or actually, you know what? Let's do it as a window. A window will probably work better because you can see through the little the bars. I don't want it to really impede on vision too much. And so if we do something like this, I'm just going to bring it all the way through and double click, and you can see that that's going to add these occluders here. And then what I'll do is just snap these in here, and this will make it nice and perfect. We can also select these occluders and change them if we so wish. You want to make sure that you make a little square because you'll see that there are actually a couple of different occluders in there. So if we select them all, we can move them all at the same time. Great, so there's all of our line of sight. Now let's switch over and we can turn on all of our different systems here. We begin to add in our different lighting. So what I would like to do, and this is a really cool way to do something, is I'm going to create this ambient light source. Maybe I want this particular area in here to generate some light, but I want it to kind of fade off in a gradual manner as they get deeper and deeper into these areas so you can really feel the darkness. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a light source, and I don't want it to cast any sort of shadows, right? I don't want it to cast shadows. I want it to go through all the walls. And I'm actually just going to drop something down like this. You can see the way that this is going to work. I'm actually going to let's make this just this kind of ambient light source, just dim, and I'm going to make this quite large. And this is going to spill out onto my map here, and that's fine. I don't really care if it does. So I'm just going to put it into a pretty good area, and you can see when I turn this on now, what I get is this really gradual kind of fade as it moves through. And I can even come back in and maybe do the fall off a little bit more if I wish. And then I could, well, let's do something like 75. I think that'll probably be pretty good. Yeah. Now from the player's perspective, and let's grab one of our players and drop it in here. We'll grab Scooby. So from Scooby's perspective, you can see that this is just a slightly lit room. And as he moves down in, as he opens this door, he's not going to see that kind of ambience that kind of expands into the surrounding area. So as he moves through, though, and let's break through this door here, you can see that it really begins to feel darker and darker as he moves forward, right? It's like it breaks free, and then we come down into the darkness here. And I can change this. This is where I start to play around from the player's perspective. And I start to look at all of these different systems and how they're interacting together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back and forth. I'm going to grab this and maybe I'll bring the dim in. Maybe we'll make it like 10. And then I can switch back over and reset Scooby's, not delete. We're going to go to vision. And we're going to reset his fog of war until I get it so that I really get this nice kind of ambience through here where it's and we might even want to bring it down a little bit too. And this is where you really want to play with these different settings. So I'm going to actually come in and I'm going to drop down the alpha of this a bit. And you want to make sure that you reset his vision so that you get a truer kind of representation of what's going on. So here we have a little bit of light, but then after we get through this broken area of the wall, it's darkness. And then we might want to add in a light to our actual player itself. And you can do that in a variety of ways. All of the rule sets, I believe now, I don't know if all of them have it set up yet or not, but they have in the effects window, we have a whole bunch of preset ones. And you can also add them in through the combat tracker super easy. So let's give him a candle and just drag it and drop it right on there, and you can see. And this will even actually have a duration attached to it as well. So this, as the rounds progress, you can actually have things that will only last a certain amount of time. So now that we've added in our little candle to our guy here, we can close that down. As he moves around, you can see that he's just exploring these little areas and through here. All right, so let's set up some cool amber kind of light sources in through here. So I'm going to turn off my line of sight and lighting for a moment. And I'm going to show you guys a really cool way of setting up a light and maintaining a certain aesthetic, especially when it comes from a color perspective. So selecting a new light source, and then I'm going to grab my color picker and my little eyedropper tool. And I'm actually going to grab the lightest color that I can from this particular image, right? Hit OK. And then when I drop my light source down in here, yeah, let's do that again. Let's make sure we're all on the same layer here. Now when I drop this in here, what I'll actually do is maintain this same kind of color. So let's go back and turn these on. And the reason why I turned off these is so that I actually got a true representation of what color was there. You can see this instantly kind of creates a nice little ambient that we have there. We have a question here. Without the candle, does Scooby have a light effect on? It appears like the light beam was coming off of the token in certain areas, but pitch black beyond the light source. So what I did is I created. So what you're actually seeing there is that there is a memory of where places that the token has been, right? So anywhere that he's had the light source and seen. So let's just demonstrate this really quickly. This is a good kind of thing to talk about here. I'm just going to delete this light, and I'm going to grab Scooby, put him in here. Let's turn on our line of sight and everything. So here we have, you can see that he only has his light source. When I unclick him as the GM, I can see all kinds of different stuff. But he only has this one light source. And as he moves around, you're going to see he's going to have this memory of where he's been. So he's going to kind of know, like, oh yeah, I've walked around this entire room. These are all the different items that are around. All kinds of different stuff. And we should probably set up lots of different other occluders in here. We could do terrain occluders for these particular elements in through here, so that you can't really, they'll cast shadows and whatnot. But as you begin to move around, you're going to get this kind of grayed out area from the areas in which you've already visited, and in those areas where you had a light source. So let's take away his light source now. We can just turn it off, right? We go into our effects and we can just turn it off, and here he is. And now when he moves into these areas, he doesn't get that. It doesn't update his memory of the areas. So if I reset his fog of war here, you can see no memory. There's no light source. So that ambient light that we created before is going to give them a little bit of memory. Oh, Control L toggles it. Yep. Oh, yeah, that's a great idea, Carl. So Control L enables or disables all those different things so that you can see it as a true representation of your image. You can only simulate a cone light from a static position, not from a token. Control P is the player GM view. Control L toggles the lighting systems on and off. So you can do some really cool things with the lighting system. So let me unclick him. Let's say, for example, here, if I wanted to create this to be more of a cone coming out of here, I could actually set up some different type of parameters. Like I could, let's say, for example, use a shadow caster. And let me just see where my light source is. It's right in the middle there. So if I select the shadow caster and I create a couple of these, well, let's and I select this and make sure that it is cast shadows. You can see that I can now control this light source. So if I wanted this, I could actually set it up so that it makes like a nice little cone. You know, I could seal off that end. So you can do certain things like this, but you should be aware that this will also cast shadows from player tokens as well. But what I like to do, especially if I'm doing something from off screen, is I will use these where it's not going to be interfered with. And then you can kind of do a whole bunch of different stuff in through there. So there is a multitude of different creative elements that you can actually add through a lot of the different interactions. Yeah, so it should be noted though that that memory of places will not reveal NPCs. So your memory has no bearing on whether or not you can see an NPC or not. So the lighting system, the LOS system, it's all works in a joint kind of combination of whether or not a player can see another token. And that includes NPCs and PCs. So if they're in the darkness, and if you only have a certain amount of light, you're never going to be able to see that other environmental kind of stuff. Do you guys have any other questions about that particular stuff? I'm just going to set up a couple of little ambient lights, and then we will extract this data as well. And I think I'm going to go with a nice, let's actually go into our add light area in here. And maybe we'll pick something like this. I'm going to drop one in here. And I think we'll drop down our ambient and, oh, let's do it in where we're supposed to do it. And I think what I'll do is kind of blend that a little bit more. Maybe we'll do this maybe coming down from, and we can turn these shadows on. We'll have this kind of coming down from the stairs and just creating a nice little ambient light source out here. And maybe we'll just make it a little bit less of a, or more of a transition. Yeah, that's correct, J-Rock. Yep, you would have to manipulate it manually, which could be cool if you were really doing like a very slow-paced kind of scary, creepy thing through an environment. But if you had to do that with multiple players, that could be a little bit cumbersome. You know what you could do actually, J-Rock? Instead of doing a cone of light, you could create a secondary token that is just the where they're shining the flashlight. So you could actually do, let's say, for example, if we were to take Lisa, for example, here, and whatever light source you wanted it to actually be, or you could actually even do it. Um, I was trying to think of a way to add that in as a player controlled device, but you could actually do something along these lines. Let's say Scooby has a flashlight, and I'm going to create a new light source here. Let's make it white, and let's make it the same on both. So it's going to be 3 by 3. And then we could actually drop down a light source like this. Let's say that this is where the flashlight is actually, we want to make sure that it casts shadows. You could actually just move this around so that it's like them shining their flashlight around. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true, Dark Soul. That's what we're looking at is some of the maps that I made for the Van Victor's guide. Yeah, and so you could have a another token, perhaps that this you could have a light source attached to and move it around. You can make the token really small. And this is what I did a little while ago. I actually did this with a handout. I attached a token with a light source on it, and the players could move it around looking at the handout. It was actually like the interior of a room, and so it's kind of like using the flashlight to look around the room. But I'll put some thought into it, J-Rock, and maybe we can come up with some really cool kind of solutions of neat, different ways that we can kind of interact with the systems. I'd love to try and do that. That's one of my favorite things to do is use all the different tools and come up with the neat and interesting things that you can use them for. Oh, the spirit? I'm not sure. I actually added one into this. There's one on the table in the first floor of this, right here. I added one in here where it was supposed to go. But I don't know if there's I have not actually looked at the rest of this. Only I've only read through the House of Lament. That's it. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that DJ break time. Yep. Yeah, yeah, you can certainly do that, Dark Soul. Yep. Yeah, you can attach. So if your line of sight is attached to a particular image record on that layer, when you move that around, it's going to carry that stuff with it. So, for example, in this particular scenario, right, we have a couple of different layers here, but if I have these kind of attached together, then it's all going to go. So here, as I move this around, you can see because it's attached to that layer, all of my line of sight and all of my lighting is going to be carried with it as it moves. Yeah, yeah, you can totally do that. You're just going to add in a lot of different elements for the GM to kind of control. That's the only downside. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to take a short break. I'm going to get a new glass of water. It's 4:30, and then we're going to be going here for another little while here. And so, if you guys have any other questions, or if there's any sort of things that you'd like to see me cover today, we'll have some open time here. So I'm more than willing to dive into a bunch of stuff. We can work on some things. It's completely up to you guys. But I'm going to go through when I get back and just show you the rest of these maps. And we'll stack them all up actually, and I'll show you how they're all kind of stuck together here. Spencer has a question. My players want a bullseye lantern. Can you grab a lantern token and make a tiny LOS occluder of a V to block the light in all directions except one? Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can do that. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to take a short break. I'll be right back. So thanks for hanging out. Hopefully, we'll be able to dive into some more stuff when I return. I'm going to show you guys the rest of these maps that I created for Van Richter's guide, The House of Lament. And then we'll get into doing whatever you guys need help with or any other exercises. All right. Well, I will be right back. And so just stick tight. Stick tight. Sit tight. All right, we're back. Thanks for hanging out and allowing me to get a little bit of a stretch and some refreshments on my beverages. I love, you know what I do? I'm not sure why I do this, but I have a one warm beverage and one cold beverage. And then I alternate back and forth between them for some reason. Oh, hey, Jiminy. Yeah, so I went through and Carl actually pointed out that there's a really easy way that you can now extract all of that data. So you can go back and watch the earlier parts. We actually did this entire map, and we did all of our line of sight and our lighting and all of that stuff. So once you've had this all set up, the main and important thing that you really need to remember when you're setting up this metadata that you want to be extracted is once you put it in here, you don't want to move it, right? So and let me demonstrate this really quickly. So it's if you were to, for example, let's just drag and drop this in here. Here's the second floor, and you can see that on the second floor you can see the roof of the porch, as well as this little platform out here, which is like a little balcony. You don't want to move this in any way. You can change the size of your grid, but you do not want to move this to line it up with the grid. Where this comes in at is where you have to do all of your line of sight. So once you've done it all, and when you go to extract it, it needs to be in the same location. If you have moved this original image, then you will your metadata is going to be off. It's going to be back to the natural center of the image itself. So you definitely want to not move your image at all. Just do all of your line of sight. And then once you have all of your line of sight set up for whatever image that you want to do, you just have to right click on this base original the base layer over here, and then you just do export metadata, and you're going to get a little pop-up, and you just extract it. And make sure that it's in the same folder as the image, and then it's all done. And if you wanted to, I actually did like a little bit of a demonstration on it before, so it should be all set. So we did it with the first floor. Here is the first floor, and here is all of the line of sight. It's also got lighting information in here. We have a couple of ambient light sources, as well as, we have our ambient light source, as well as all of these other lights, and this is all included in here. So once it's, and let me just demonstrate, I can go back into my images now, and let's delete this, right? That had all of that information in there. So now if I grab and I drag and drop this in, you can see all of this information is in there, as well as whatever I had the grid set to. So all of this information will be exported. As you can see, it's all right there, right where we want it to be. Great. So I'm just going to go through and show off these maps. I know that this was something that people had asked for last time. So here is the second floor, and we can actually just stack these up. Let me just and I'll just drop this down underneath. I'm going to turn off the lighting system for right now. So here we have the first floor, and then we have the second floor. Doing some of these was super fun, like creating these moldy kind of textures on top of this stuff. All of the different little elements. And here, let's go to the third floor. Again, I'm just going to stack these right on top of each other. And one of the things I really like to do is do the roof of the lower elements as it progresses. So it all kind of makes sense. I find that to be really fun. Like this, there's like this bag with these like scratch marks that go into the back. That was all of that kind of stuff I find really satisfying to create. This is like a children's room. It's supposed to be all kinds of colorful, broken up furniture. And then there were like toys on the beds with a skeleton in a rocking chair. And then we have the top floor or the roof area. So this has all been created here. And then as we were just looking at here, we have the basement. And we can just drag and drop that to the bottom. So those are all of the maps that I created for the House of Lament. And so do you guys have any other questions? Is there anything else that you would like to see any sort of demonstration on? This is the dark theme that will be coming out, I guess, if it didn't come out this last Tuesday, it'll be coming out this next Tuesday. Should be super fun. This is my favorite theme so far. I use it all the time now. Especially when you have to spend a lot of time inside of Fantasy Grounds working on stuff. It's very easy on the eyes. It doesn't replace it, no, Jiminy. It's a new one. Sure, Spencer. I can. I'm in Core RPG right now, so it's going to be a bit different. But I can back out and go into 5e if you want. If that's what you're kind of thinking about, what it's going to look like in 5e. No problem. Oh, that's a good question. We got a question from YouTube. How would you handle if the party goes to different floors, like splitting the party? So one of the ways. Oh, let me get rid of this decal. One of the ways, and we can jump into that in just a moment. But here's Bob. This is the character sheets in 5e. And if you want to look at like any of the different elements here, like spells, for example. But maybe he has acid splash. Some of them will have, and some of them it's dependent on where that stuff kind of comes from. So the question is, do 5e magic items like drift globes and whatnot? So that is system dependent and dependent on the developer of those systems. So some of it will, yes. Not completely, Jiminy. And I'll do a little demonstration for you really quickly. And I also want to do, let me get, before I get too far behind, different party sheets. So let me go into my images here. Let's go to uncategorized. Let's go into my assets and in my data here. I'll actually do a boulder for you, Jiminy, in just a second. But if I were to set this up and I wanted it to be all on one map, and the way that I would do this so that players can go into different levels is I would actually, whoops, let's delete this. Let's set this to 100 and then I'll just turn it off. So what I would actually do is I would set them up just like this. Or I might do it something like this, but it doesn't matter. I would just set them up next to each other, and then I would separate them with line of sight. And so as my players, if they wanted to go to different levels, I can have them in totally different parts, right? And so what I would actually do is, we got an aboleth in here. We have Bob and Bobbert. So Bob might be on the first floor, maybe in here, and maybe we're on the second floor here. And so these would be able to interact with each other without a problem. And then all of your line of sight would be remembered and all of that stuff as well. Okay, so let's do a really quick demonstration of extracting this data once again. So I'm going to go into my library here, not my library, my assets. And, oh, I already have it open. Let's go all the way up into images here. And let's just look up, I'm just going to grab, well, I'll go into one of these images that doesn't have line of sight attached to it. So let's say, for example, I'm going to go into, let's go into the goblin. And I'm just going to type in rock. And here we have a couple of different rocks. So let's say I'm going to, and this is really the kind of the importance of going through these steps. I'm going to grab this one particular rock and I'm going to drag and drop it in here, right? Let's turn off anything that I don't want to have necessarily involved in the system. I'm not going to move this in any way. I'm going to set my grid type to whatever I wish. This already has an XML file attached to it, which tells it what its size should be, or what the grid size should be when I use this. I'm going to go into my line of sight, and I don't want to move this. If I move this image, if I'm in here and I move this image, it's going to cause issues with my line of sight. So I want to make sure it stays exactly where it is. Now I'm going to come in, and let's say I want to make this a terrain piece. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to go around it, adding my line of sight here. And so now I've added my line of sight to this. Now all I have to do is right click on this and export my data here. And let me just switch this over so you can actually see what I'm doing. So this is going to pop up when I extract that data. And then I can have rock, goblin. This is going to be named exactly the same thing as my image is going to be named. And that's important. We want to make sure that this is exactly the same, except it's an XML file. And now I'm going to save this into the same folder that the rock is in, right? So wherever that might be, whatever my image might be. And when I save this in here, what it's going to do is it's going to extract all of my line of sight data, all of my lighting, everything. So if I have this set up, and let's say, for example, if I want to make a torch image. So inside of here, we also have torch, as you can see here. Now I can set up a light system with this, and so every time I drag this out, it's going to include that lighting system with it. So let's say, for example, I'm going to grab this one over and do this. Here is the torch. And I'm going to add a light to it. So maybe I'm going to do a preset of a torch, right? Preset of a torch. And boom, I'm going to drop that right on there. And then, well, I want to make sure, let's make sure it's on this particular layer itself. And so this is already attached to this. Now I can export this data. This is going to pop up, and now I have Goblin Torch decoration. Boom. And now every time, once I've saved that, you do have to restart Fantasyground sometimes to make sure that it grabs that data correctly. Because you can then, once that's saved into the same folder as my image, then when I drag out this image every time, it's going to bring that light source with it. Let's see here. We got a couple of questions here. Oh, yeah, I like the Wizard's Death theme too, Dark Soul. I had a lot of fun making that one. Oh, yes, that would be cool, Jiminy. Oh, good. I'm glad that makes sense to you. Once you have the line of sight attached to an image, so let's say, for example, and I can demonstrate this too. Let's go to an image that does have line of sight attached to it already. Maybe we'll go into, yeah, sure, underground. I believe that there are some walls and things in here that have line of sight attached to them. So here, I'm going to drag and drop this over. You can see that there is line of sight attached to it here. There it is. And so as I move this around, that's going to move with it, whether I hold shift or not. It's going to, as long as it's attached in the same layer as my actual image, like it's all attached in here, then yes, this is all going to move the same way. It would be good if I actually clicked on the right things. So as you can see, as I move this around and I move it over here, you can see the line of sight is already attached there. And then if I drag something else out like this, snap them together, boom, our line of sight all snaps together and it works. Yes, you can. So the question is, can we still drag an image file right from the PC's image folder to the image window in FGU? Yep, so what you can do is inside of your images right here, you just drag it and drop it right into your workspace. We got a question from Svenster. You say you don't move it. Does that include changing the size or duplicating it? Yes. Yep. So when this is only for when you're extracting the line of sight data, right? So you can move it if you're not going to do that, but only if you're going to extract that data. So you're going to be using the same image over and over again, and you want to have line of sight included with that image. If you're going to extract it, then don't move it. If you're just creating a map that you're going to be using to play on, move everything. It's not going to change it whatsoever. So I can just kind of demonstrate this and what I mean if you guys want. So let's say, for example, we have this rock, right? Now, if I, let's remove my line of sight here. Whoops. Let's remove my line of sight. And now let's turn on my grid and let's say, oh, I want to line this up with the grid. So I come over here and I go, oh, I'll put it there. Because I've moved it from its original orientation, and now if I do my line of sight, and if I extract this now, right, I overwrite the other one. And now if I have extracted this, and set it up, when I drag this back in, right, so that's not going to actually work because this is included into an art package. I don't have like a blank image out here. But then if I drag and drop this in, that line of sight data is going to be skewed from the image because it's anticipating that that image is going to be connected to it in the original orientation, not in the new adjusted orientation. So if I'm just going to do it in this particular instance, right, I can move this around, and because it's all the same, it's going to move with it. But if I have moved this for my first iteration of creating the image record for the extracting of the data, then we'll have some issues. But besides that, if you're not extracting that data to be used in multiple applications, then you don't have to worry about it. You can move things away. Don't worry about it at all. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Do you guys have any other questions about any of this stuff? Let's see here. Can you copy an asset, change the location of orientation, apply LOS, save, and have it be okay? Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, so this only applies to if you are setting up like art packages and whatnot, where you want to have line of sight included into an image. That's the only thing that this applies to. That was the original question: was how do you extract that data so that you can create your own art packages kind of scenario. Regular usage, though, you don't have to worry about it. You can move, change, duplicate, change anything you want. Yeah, no problem at all. So we have another question here that is wondering if they've gone into handling height levels, crests and valleys, etc., using a line of sight. Yes, you can do a lot of that with line of sight. You certainly can. There is no height indicator, however, right? Like there's nothing that says if something is over a certain height, does it see over a wall, and if something under a certain height, does it see under it? But let's see here. I'm sure that we have. Might have maybe we have some maps in here that we could. Nope, that's not going to work. But I could probably demonstrate certain elevation elements like this. So a lot of these elements right here, we have map 7. We have some things in here, but you'll notice that it is locked, read only. So I'm just going to duplicate it. Now that I've duplicated it, I can now open it up and I can access all of the things on the side here. So here we have like a pit, right? We have several different layers. It gets lower and lower down into a pit. So how am I going to do that with my line of sight? Well, I'm just going to come over into my line of sight, make sure I have my layer selected. I'm actually going to use my pit area here. And I'm going to start here in the bottom. Whoop. Let's do that over. I start down here at the bottom. And if I want to, I can change all of these kind of parameters. If I want to not block movement or make it not toggleable, I can do that as well. So I'm going to make it blocks movement, but not toggleable. And I'm just going to click and I'm going to go around the edges of this original pit. And you'll see how this is going to affect our line of sight here. And then I'm going to come up to my next level and do another one. And we'll do this one. And just for simplicity's sake, I won't go too into making this. And so here we have several series of pits. Let me move over into here. We can grab Bob and drop him here. Let's turn on our line of sight. And I'm going to just click on, we're going to turn on our lighting system here. So the way that this works is, and he's got dark vision, so I'm just going to turn on some ambient light source real quick here. Let's just do a preset. Let's do sunlight. You can see we have these pits set up, right? And now when I come in with my actual player, he can see down into these pits, no problem. But once he gets into the pit, he cannot see up out of it, right? Like as he gets progressively lower, everything that is beyond that is now outside of his view. So what he can actually see is everything that's around him, anything that's above that crest of the pit, he can't. And as he continues up, so you can use these in lots of different cool ways. There's no way to share individual layers with players. No. Once you share a record, so what you do is you just right click and you can share record. What you can do is have several maps set up and you can share individually. So if you drag this little icon up here, this little this is the actual record icon. If you drag this onto a specific token, not token but portrait, it'll share it only with that person. So you could have several different images set up instead of layers, and then you can share those with whichever players you wish. Yep, that's true too, Jiminy. Yep, yeah. As long as you have everything set up appropriately, then you can do it lots of different ways. I create most of the assets in Photoshop, yes. So the question is, are your base images done in Photoshop, or are you doing everything in FGU? No, I do. Most of my base images are created in Photoshop. Yep. If you have a specific example, Zardak, I can tell you how I would approach what you're trying to do. If you tell me the kind of ins and outs of exactly what you're trying to achieve. Oh yeah, great, Jameson. Yeah, you can, and you can combine them too. So here's a really cool thing that I like to do, and let me just show you this really quickly. We'll close this down, and let's just go to uncategorize. I'll grab, let's see here. Well, let's go into the winter art pack. There's some neat buildings in there. And inside of our decorations, you can see we have a whole bunch of these kind of buildings. So this is the kind of stuff that I like to do as well. So let's say, for example, we have one of these little structures. And I'll do something that's pretty simple here. Maybe like this one. Drag this over. So for example, if I was going to set this up, and I'm going to do this with terrain, this guy, and I'm just going to grab a rectangle here. Well, I'll do it with this. So what I'll do is I'll actually set this up like this, and then I will overlap like this. And now I'm going to just come in and clean this up a little bit to make sure that these are all in the right areas here. And move over here. So this is a great way. I should probably put a background in here so that we can actually kind of see how this is going to interact. I could probably actually grab one of these as a background. So here we have this nice winter village. I'm just going to drop this down underneath. And we'll put this guy right in here somewhere. And let's grab Bob again, drop him onto the map. And we'll make it a nice sunlit day. Okay, so here we have a nice little interaction here with Bob and this building. So if we go into player view, you're going to see this a little bit better. What this allows Bob to do, and when you set up these things this way, is that Bob can see only one side of this building's roof, right? And as he moves around, he's not going to be able to see the other side of this roof. But if Bob crawls up onto the roof and stands right in the middle, he can see everywhere. So this gives a really good kind of explanation of how you can kind of interact these with a whole bunch of different ways to create more believable kind of atmospheric environments. So here, if I had an NPC hiding on the roof, he could be crouched down and Bob wouldn't be able to see him. But if he climbs up here, he's going to be able to see everything as far as he can from on top of that roof. Let's see, the question is there a way to simulate angle of vision, for example? If you're far enough from a platform, you can see what's near the edges, but you can't see what's further in. Yes, I know exactly what you mean. And which this is kind of what I'm explaining with this particular scenario, is that you can set it up that way with a little bit of an inventive thinking with your line of sight. So let's see here, Zardak, I hate moving tokens around, so I'd like to have a single image with a different layer for each floor. If the party moves to the stairs, yep. The only problem with doing it that way, Zardak, is you have player vision that's going to remember where they've been before. So it's better if you just kind of place the separate four floors on next to each other instead of on a stack. So yeah, that's just kind of the angle of vision. So let's say, for example, we're going to do the same thing. Let's move over to this building, or maybe this one. This one's a little bit more complex, so we can come up with some cool ways to interact with this. So I'm going to do it on the same level as this other one where I already have some line of sight attached. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to divide this up into a couple of different increments here. Yeah, I think, oh, actually, I think the way to do this one will be not this way. Let me start this over. It does take a little bit of forethought, but I think what I'm going to do is do here like this. And then I will do this one here. Like this. And then I'll do some on the inside over there. I'm just going to move in and fix this. And you can see that we're creating our angles from our roof here. And now I'm going to do one here. And then I'm going to do one on this side as well. Now these are all going to interact together here, and I'll show you in a moment. So here we have Bob, and you can see he can see just on the edge here, right, as he's moving around. He's going to be able to see what's on the front side of this building. And as he moves back into this location, he's going to be able to see these areas and how they're interact. We probably don't need this divide in here. This should probably all be one piece. But as he moves around, he's going to only see the sides of the building that is appropriate to him. And when he climbs up on top, you can see that, and he's on top here, he's going to be able to see all around, but not on what's on the other side of that particular environment. Yep, that's right, Dark Soul. That's how I would. That's how I would set it up too. So by using the way that these interact together in multiple ways, you can create some really interesting kind of effects. And the other cool thing about this is that your shadows can be cast from these as well. So if we go back into our ambient area here, you can see we can have these nice cast shadows from our terrain pieces. So you can get these nice little cast shadows, and they'll actually create shadows on the image itself, which is super fun. So that's how I handle a lot of that angled kind of stuff. I'll do the same thing if there's like a cliff face. So for example, let's close that down. I don't know if I have any pre-created kind of cliffs that we can do here, but let's go back. I'll just grab like this blank kind of area here. And we'll just paint a cliff on here really quickly, and we'll do a brief demonstration of this. So inside of the winter pack, I think that we have a couple of cliff brushes. So I'll just make a painted layer really quick. And I'm just going to paint this down. Well, let's go the other direction. So here we have a cliff, right, that comes along through here. I would do shadows and all these things. But we want to set up our line of sight for this in a particular way, right? And we want to be able to see the first edge of the cliff, but nothing beyond that. And we want to be able to stand on the top of the cliff and be able to see out into all of these particular areas as well. So what I would do in this kind of scenario is I use a pit for this entire area. And I'm going to turn it all of this stuff off. And I'm just going to start in this corner, and then I'll begin to paint this around. And I'm just going to put this up here onto the just the beginning edge. Whoops. Let's try that again, but this time I won't double click, I promise. And we're just going to move along, and I'll just do a little bit of a rough kind of thing as we're getting kind of low on time here. And double click. Now remember, we cannot see out of a pit, but we can see into a pit. So what we can do is when we grab our, let's grab Bobbert, and let's turn on our line of sight and whatnot. And here we have our guy. This is our player vision here. So let's add in some ambient light. We'll just do our sunlight here. We don't need to have any shadow. So what we're going to do here is we'll be able to see from the top here. And we could actually set up another scenario here where you won't be able to see for a small section from the top unless you were right up here. But the way that this works is if you're down here and you see up into this particular area, the downside is this doesn't quite work right. So I would readjust this with a couple of different layers of doing it this way. But this way, if you're down on this particular area up here and you want to be able to see what's on the very top of the cliff, but not what's behind it, you can kind of get the idea here. And then when you're up here, you can see down in, and there is no kind of effect there. I know there's no automatic adjustment from one particular area to the next. So the question is, if you have different floors on the same map, is there a way for players to transition tokens through set points? And no, there's no automated feature for that. Oh yeah, so apparently there is an Portals extension which you can get on DM's Guild. Yeah, that's probably true, Jiminy. We probably should do a few examples. Maybe I'll put a couple of examples together of good ways to set that stuff up. So you can see that the interaction between all of the different occluders can become very complex, and you can create some really nice and dynamic kind of environments. All right, guys. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm going to call it a little bit early today. It's just about 5:30, so a little bit. Usually we run till around 6 o'clock, but I actually have to get scooting here shortly. Any other follow-up questions? Is there anything that I can answer before I head out? Or if there's anything else? And please, I'm going to put my, as I always do, my email address, my work one, in the chat. If you guys run into any problems, if there is something that you'd like to see me cover on my Saturday stream, I'm here every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We usually run till about 6. Sometimes I head out a little bit early, but we usually get at least 2 or 2.5 hours in. So if there's anything, if there is an art product that you would like a demonstration of, or if there's something that you're thinking about picking up, let me know and I can get it all loaded up and show you exactly what's in there. At the beginning of my stream, I usually go through all of the different news that is image related, that as far as like things that are coming out, things that are in production, and so on and so forth. We run through all kinds of different tutorials. We do a whole bunch of different stuff. So please, if you guys have any questions or anything at all, let me know. Great, guys. Well, thank you so much. And we will see you all next time. Take care, all.